This is a 1993 Honda Goldwing Aspencade. I've wanted to review an older Goldwing for quite some time on this channel, and when the chance to ride this bike came up, I just couldn't resist. This bike has features that would make economy cars jealous, and in my view, it perfected the touring bike formula over 30 years ago. And hear me out, this may be the most American motorcycle ever built. I'm gonna get this bike out on the road and back in the studio to give you a super comprehensive look at this motorcycle because I think it represents a truly unique and peerless touring bike experience. We got a great episode for you today, weaving together a tale about continuous improvement, US and Japanese excellence, and mechanical character wrapped up in a silky smooth package. There's nothing quite like a Goldwing. I picked this bike up off of Twisted Road, a website where you can list and rent out your own ride. I'm an investor in the company and I would love to see you try a bike out. Click the link down below and rent a bike today. All right, enough yapping, let's swing a leg and go for a ride. Honda Goldwing Aspencade in all of its majestic glory. Look at this larger than life machine, a 900-pound slab of metal. This incredible motorcycle has features that would make any new CF Moto a little bit jealous. This thing's sweet, man. Look at the seat right here. Look at the AM, FM, the cassette player. Are you kidding me? The Goldwing's got it all, baby. Almost mythical in its nature. I've been wanting to do a first generation 6-cylinder Goldwing for quite some time. These are one of the most iconic motorcycles ever made, I would say. Let's swing a leg, or I guess shoot a leg through it. And you know, the Goldwing is a bike that a lot of people think is really heavy, really big, but man, Honda designed it so that, like, yeah, it's huge. Like, you sit on it and you're like, Jesus, the dashboard never ends and there's so much plastic. You know, I normally ride an adventure bike on road, a 660, or I ride 600s on track, so I'm used to smaller motorcycles. But it's pretty straightforward. It is carbureted, but you know, by the 90s, they had developed a pretty straightforward understanding of motorcycles. Go ahead and put it in neutral, pull in the clutch, and fire it up. It's nice and warm, no need for the choke. Fires right up, baby. 6 cylinders. It's very car-like, right? These two dashes and the speakers, all this plastic. Yeah, this feels like a lot of automobiles I've been in my youth. One of the more neat features is actually the reverse gear on this motorcycle. You pull up here, pull it up, you're in reverse, in neutral, and then you hit the starter and it backs right up. It actually utilizes the starter motor to do that, so you actually hit the starter there and then it backs up, which is a really cool feature. Pop it back down, set her down into first, grab a nice heavy clutch, and away we go, shall we? Now, the Goldwing is a motorcycle that you must be, deliberate with. This is a bike that you don't rush. You take your time with all the inputs. You make sure that you know what you're doing and where you're going, because it is not easy stopping 900 pounds of motorcycle. The wing does kind of belie its weight a little bit. You know, it goes down the road in this magic carpet way. It's got this real nice long wheelbase, silky smooth engine. It's got the bubble shield, everything tightly fitted on it. And it's just a beautiful thing going down the road. This is exactly what this bike was designed to do. And you can probably hear through my microphone just how whisper quiet this motorcycle is. It's nearly unbelievable how quiet it actually is. I actually hear more road noise from the tires than anything else when I'm on this bike. I barely hear the engine. I hear some creaking and clacking of plastics just because the bike is, you know, 32 years old, nearly as old as I am, which is really quite amazing. And it just beautifully flows down the road. But you want to take your time with it, you know? All of your inputs, the gear changes, the braking, everything has to happen earlier and smoother on a Goldwing, especially one of this vintage. I had the chance in 2022 to ride a brand spanking new Goldwing at the time. It was the first one I'd ever ridden, and these bikes leave an incredible impression on you. They're the sort of machine that, you know, it's unlike anything else, and when you ride one you go, wow, like that is just really impressive what it can do and how it just
absolutely nails what it was designed to do, which is just this. It's beautiful, mile munching, slight sweepers. Like, this is all the wing wants to do. This 1993 model does not feature the new wishbone suspension up front. So we have a standard telescopic front end on this motorcycle, connected by these outrageously long, borderline scooter-like, you know, handlebars here. It does cause some slight disconnect between, you know, steering input and what the bike actually does. There's almost like a bit of a delay just because I think the force is translating through so much distance. I could be wrong about that, but it just feels like it lags a little bit an initial tip in, and the bike is just, you know, it's just a little slower to do everything it needs to do. Speaking of slow, the motorcycle is unfortunately not as peppy as you would expect. It builds pace really nicely and low down, and it can absolutely pass and accelerate as much as it would ever need to, but because it's so quiet and because it's not all that powerful and it's super heavy, acceleration isn't quite the Goldwing's forte. However, it can maintain and go up to a pretty fast clip really nicely. You'll notice on the dash it says OD, that is for overdrive. This motorcycle has 5 speeds for the gearbox, and 5th gear is a bit of an overdrive gear, and so that's what you get with this bike. No 6 speeds, nothing fancy. This is old school 5-speed gearbox on this bad boy. One gripe I do have, which you guys can probably tell through the GoPro, is this windshield, although very good at keeping the wind off of my entire upper body, my head included, it does cause a strange warping effect. It looks like I'm looking through 2 different visors, and it's not the most confidence-inspiring feeling. Vision is obviously the most important thing when you're riding a motorcycle, and, you know, this kind of warps and bends, you know, right at the edge of the windshield, and I often find myself looking right at that edge if I'm going downhill and through a corner. And so if this were my Goldwing, I'd probably get a windshield that was a little lower. I think this is the factory windshield, but I'd get one that's a little lower, and so I could actually just see through it. You know, I'd still get the nice chest protection. I don't need the complete convertible experience with the Goldwing, but, you know, I think having the ability to see really nice and sharply is very important on the bike, of course. Yeah, you know, the experience is very much like an old school convertible. With the top down, cruising along like this, it actually feels almost identical to a convertible car, which is why a lot of people joke and say, oh, you know, if you're riding around in a convertible Miata, you could get a Goldwing and it's functionally the same experience. And truthfully, it's not all that wrong. Like, yes, I can lean the bike over and I actually have this motion, and that's the super unique part about riding motorcycles, obviously. But between the car dash and the speakers and even the sound and the timbre of the engine and the way that it only redlines to about 5,500 RPM, it's kind of like a convertible car. It's the closest thing I could describe to it if you've never ridden a Goldwing before. Now, that motor's redline might seem rather tame and low to you, but the thing is, this bike was designed to run as smooth and nice as possible. When you have a highly buzzing motorcycle engine, that obviously is going to introduce vibrations, even with a perfectly balanced Boxer 6 like this motorcycle has. So the Goldwing's whole thing is to just cruise at near diesel levels of RPMs. It just churns along the road, you know, between 1,500 to 2,500 RPMs, just beautifully. Given that this model is 32 years old, there is a bit of slop in everything, and that's totally to be expected. I can't really fault the bike for having a little bit of slop, you know. A lot of key components are probably close to, if not wearing out a little bit. So, you know, in the initial tip-in, there's a bit of wiggle on the steering here. The bike stops appropriately, I would say, but it doesn't feel razor sharp. But it's also a Goldwing from the 90s. Like, I would be surprised if it had race bike like brakes. But honestly, it's just incredible how well it's come along and how nice it is to ride, given that it is so old. This motorcycle actually has taken the crown for the oldest bike that I've ridden. Before this one, it was actually another Honda. It was an RVF 400 in Australia from 1994, and now this 1993 has dethroned it a little bit. And you might say, oh man, this guy's never ridden anything from like the 60s or 70s, but truthfully, not a lot of those bikes are still around, you know? It's stuff like this Honda Goldwing and other extremely well-built motorcycles that still exist that we can still enjoy and ride, but you know, they're few and far in between. Not a lot of, you know, 60s and 70s bikes out there on the roads consistently. A lot of them are show bikes and just hanging on, and that really is this thing's claim to fame. It's this kind of mechanical simplicity and purity that the motorcycle has. A perfect example of that is this cruise control over here. So the bike obviously is cable actuated, but inside this little box is a cruise control module that through mechanical wizardry can allow you to adjust and set your cruise control. And the whole bike is like that, right? This was before mass proliferation of computer systems in motorcycles, and so this whole thing is just very mechanically pure. And a lot of the problems that they solved for, they used solutions that were just pure raw mechanical engineering rather than turning to a computer to adjust and solve for something. You know, they were just ingenious. And so the Goldwing ends up feeling like a finely tuned watch. It just has this beautiful mechanical timeless quality about it that I think a lot of people really enjoy. I think that's one of the main reasons people keep coming back to these things and still enjoying these particular generations of Goldwings. So it's just a gorgeous thing to cruise along a beautiful sweeping hill country road. You just want to slab up mile after mile with this thing. The seat has this nice backrest to it. You got all the features you could ever want. You got cruise control. It's just a wonderful machine. Let's jump over to a Twisty section of road just to kind of see what the Goldwing can do a little bit. Then we'll get it in the shop and talk through some really cool history about this motorcycle and some fun things you may not know about it. Quick test on the Goldwing's Twisty road prowess. Is it as advanced as all those old timers claim? They say, I can whip my Goldwing around them corners. It is remarkable how it can go through corners. I don't think it's the correct tool for the job. I could think of, I don't know, maybe 100 different motorcycles that would do this job better. But it's pretty amazing that, you know, it's a touring motorcycle first that can definitely do corner carving business. It's pretty poised and pretty graceful in the way that it handles a nice twisty ribbon of asphalt. It's pretty nice. I've ridden plenty of touring style Harley Davidsons that the Goldwing would just absolutely embarrass and obliterate. This is a motorcycle that has really nice chassis balance and just a really well executed machine. It doesn't feel like the way that it handles was an afterthought. It feels like it was cohesively designed to not only go down the road as beautifully and majestically as possible, it also goes down the road with a little bit of refinement and control and precision. And that's pretty sweet. Even all the way back in 1993 when they really didn't need to do that to this bike, but it still does it pretty well. As I mentioned earlier, you still got to be deliberate, pick your moments, understand that you don't have a whole lot of lean angle and you don't have a whole lot of grip to play with, and you want to just do everything a little bit slower and a little bit more thoughtfully with this machine. If you have a decreasing radius like this over here, you just want to make sure you're riding well within the margins to go ahead and just take that corner, you know? That you don't have to adjust anything in a crazy way, because I do think the Goldwing, if prodded in an extreme way, I'm not so sure it would behave so nicely. I think it does so when you're graceful with it, but if you were to try to muscle this thing around and slap it around, I don't think it's going to be very nice back to you. Motor's got a nice amount of torque off the apex. Really nice to drive out of corners with this big 1500cc 6-cylinder motor. But it's not particularly fast. Like, you can go wide open and it's not gonna, you know, blow your hair back by any means. Let me go ahead and just open it up there in the middle. I mean, that's picking up some speed. Okay, Goldwing. Oh my God, brake. Brake, please, for the love of God. Yeah, a pretty willing dance partner, but nothing to write home about. I think it's a fun side feature that this bike handles as well as it does, but nothing that I would be like, ah, yes, the Goldwing's handling is a beautiful quality about it. Not necessarily. But let's jump back to the studio and talk you through some fun facts and stories about this bike, because there's a lot to say about this machine.
Let's start off with a history lesson and lay the groundwork for this incredible machine. The 4th generation Goldwing represents a quantum leap in our understanding of long-distance touring motorcycles. The first models to wear the Goldwing nameplate were the GL1000s back in the 70s. Now these were actually naked, shaft-driven flat fours that weren't necessarily designed to be excellent at long-distance travel just yet. Riders in the US started to use GL1000s in this particular way. They were adding windjammer fairings to make the bikes more comfortable, and they were doing longer stints in the saddle. It's a story we've seen time and time again, with the Scramblers in the 60s, the Trail 125, or even the Street Fighters of the 90s. Riders modifying their bikes for a specific use, and then manufacturers responding with factory models that do the job better. But long before riders were morphing their GL1000s into proto-Goldwings, Honda had an internal team that knew what the formula needed to be. In 1971, they had concocted the M1 prototype, which instead of using a transverse mounted engine, it used a longitudinally mounted engine, which meant it could have shaft drive. And the most critical part? It actually featured a 1470cc liquid-cooled Boxer 6 engine that was designed to have the broadest spread of torque possible and the lowest center of gravity that any motorcycle had ever seen. These designers knew exactly what to do to make the ultimate touring machine way back then. So why didn't Honda just make this bike? Well, they feared that riders simply weren't ready for 6 cylinders, that the bike was just too big and too complicated, and Americans would not accept this. So the 4-cylinder Goldwing was launched, compromised in its initial design, and sporting a gigantic flywheel to try and reduce all those vibrations. The Goldwing was always meant to target the American market, but Honda chose to do something fascinating for the bike's development. They established a production facility in Marysville, Ohio to not only hand assemble the bikes in their intended market, but to also rapidly understand who they were building the bikes for. The engines were still being produced in Japan and then shipped in crates to the US and then assembled here, but Honda marketed the bike as Made in America. After Honda established this facility, it became really clear that American riders would not only accept a 6-cylinder Goldwing, but they craved abundance, excess, and luxury. There's a case to be made that the Goldwings that were assembled here in the USA represent one of the most American bikes ever made. Let me explain. This motorcycle was conceived by a foreign company for a foreign market, but instead of just shipping bikes that they thought Americans would like, they invested in our domestic market. They sent workers here, they had their employees immigrate here, and they worked hard to build something better than the competition. Instead of crying to the government for help and seeking protectionism like Harley-Davidson did in the 80s, Honda dug deep and worked hard. That passion for excellence, work ethic, and spirit of invention and innovation is, to me, the most American of values. We're the country that sent people to the moon first. We're pioneers and explorers, and we're a nation of people who came to this expansive continent in search of a better life. And unless you have an indigenous background, every great American can trace their ancestry back to somebody who decided to immigrate to this country. The Goldwing is innovative, cutting edge, and it represents a belief that better is not only possible, it's necessary. And I think that's cool as hell. If you define an American motorcycle by who rides it, where it rides, who it was designed for, how it's used, and where it was made, then the Goldwing makes an extremely strong case for itself as the most American motorcycle ever made. Long open highways, 2-up touring, and excellent refinement and build quality. Sounds pretty American to me. In 1987, over 15 years after the original M1 prototype was crafted in Japan, Honda developed and tested the 4th-gen Goldwing using that formula of a long and low 6-cylinder motorcycle. And that 6-cylinder was absolutely crucial to why the Goldwing has this kind of magic carpet vibe. The Boxer 6 is what engineers consider perfectly balanced. That means that the primary and secondary forces cancel each other out. In a flat 6, each piston has a directly opposed twin moving in the exact opposite direction at the same speed. This means you don't need counterweights to smooth out vibrations, but it gets even better because the secondary forces, which occur because pistons don't move at constant speeds throughout the stroke, also gets canceled out. And the best part? With 6 cylinders arranged at 180 degrees apart, the Goldwing's firing order is evenly spaced at 120 degrees. Now that means that there's a power stroke every 120 degrees of rotation and no pulsing imbalances, no rocking couples, no end-to-end twisting motions. Combine that with an ultra-low center of gravity and you've got the formula for the absolute perfect touring bike platform. The Goldwing's engine is one of the only cases in motorcycling where generation after generation, the maximum RPM of this engine just keeps going down. This is because the designers knew that high RPMs just cause more vibration. The best thing to do is to make broad torque down low. I'm kind of surprised they didn't think to make a diesel Goldwing. Maybe it would have been too clattery and loud. Honda's engineers certainly know better than I do. They started sprinkling in features that were unthinkable in a time where many economy cars, let alone motorcycles, didn't have them. The GL 1500 Aspencade featured a built-in AM/FM radio, intercom system for rider and passenger, and CB radio capability, all integrated into the fairing controls. It also has an electric reverse gear, which was a pretty creative use of the electric starter motor linked to the transmission. Air suspension, which was powered by an air compressor that could adjust suspension preload at the push of a button, while electronic cruise control made highway touring effortless. Auto-canceling turn signals, adjustable windscreens, and huge integrated luggage is just all the stuff you would get on a Goldwing. So, what did this cost back in 1993? It must have been a pretty penny. The original MSRP was $15,499, which translates to $34,794 in 2025. The new Goldwing retails for $25,200, which means it actually got a lot cheaper and better over the years. That's pretty cool. Running through the other specs here, the engine is 1520 cc's and produces 100 horsepower at 5,200 RPM and 110 foot-pounds of torque at 4,000 RPM. That is righteous and immediate power. But the wet weight is about 820 pounds ready to ride, which, yeah, is no featherweight. But as you saw in my ride and review, once you get moving, it's phenomenally well balanced and pretty easy to maneuver. The wing has a pretty short 29.1-inch seat height, giving it an easygoing ability to flat foot. The frame is actually an aluminum unit with an integrated subframe, and the transmission, as you saw on the ride, is only 5 gears, which was pretty standard for the time. The shaft drive means there's virtually zero maintenance, and it has dual discs up front with twin piston calipers. Wouldn't know it by looking at it because you actually can't see them. But fun fact, the rotor for the rear is actually bigger than the front, telling you that Honda expected riders to utilize that one more than usual, probably coming from the Harley-Davidson world. It features a pretty unique wheel and tire setup too, with a 130/70/18 up front and a 160/80/16 out back, meaning it may be tough to find tires for this bike in the modern era. I'm a big fan of old school machines that accomplish their mission statement through sheer mechanical prowess and clever engineering. Before we had computers controlling everything, engineers and designers had to get really creative on how to solve problems. The 1993 Goldwing gives you the utmost refinement and comfort, but it blends it with a mechanical charm and a tactile feel. It's testament to Honda's prowess that this motorcycle is still on the road, churning miles and providing smiles. I mean, it's still in really good nick. There's a great anecdote about Honda's development of one of the most critical parts of this machine that I believe is emblematic of their approach. In order to design the best seat possible for the Goldwing, they obviously had to put on a ton of test miles on their prototype bikes. Honda actually had their test riders followed by a box truck, which contained a rolling production facility for a seamstress to test different seats on different days. Honda dialed the seat in based on fabrics, foam, size, shape, and a bunch of other factors after countless iterations. It's also said that prior to releasing this first generation 6-cylinder model, they created 15 different test mules just to make it perfect. This bike represents Honda's engineering excess and excellence, a rolling testament to the pursuit of perfection. Even though Honda made a ton of these bikes, and I'm sure you've seen dozens, if not hundreds of them on the road, it's just as special and unique as Honda's more exotic creations like the RC30 or the NR750. And from a historical perspective, it's also kind of amazing how the US and Japanese relations evolved after World War II. These were two countries that were bitterly at war with each other in the Pacific Theater roughly 40 years prior to the Marysville, Ohio Honda plant being built. The Goldwing represents a hopeful and peaceful vision of how we can work together to build amazing things. Instead of focusing on how we can divide each other, or worse, kill each other, we can come together and bond over our shared interests, and in this case, badass, comfortable touring motorcycles. From a personal perspective, I don't know if I'm quite ready yet for a Goldwing. I think I lack the abundance of time required to hit the open road for weeks at a time and utilize this machine for its intended purpose. Truthfully, it's pretty specialized. As a guy who's married with a young kid and another on the way, the best I can hope for is a quick weekend ride to blow off the cobwebs or a day at the track here and there. But I can see the vision. Should I be so lucky to enjoy decades of motorcycling, which I firmly intend on, I can easily see myself trying out the long-distance fun of a Goldwing. I've been fascinated by the Goldwing since I first rode one on this channel nearly 4 years ago. They leave an incredible impression, riding differently and more elegantly than nearly any other motorcycle. It really is a two-wheeled limousine. Anytime someone asks me about a bike to go long distances, the answer is simple: just get a Goldwing. But now, I think I have an even deeper appreciation for this iconic model. Piloting a classic Goldwing like this not only signifies a rider's understanding of using the right tools for the job, I think it also represents a bit of a discerning taste. Sure, a new Goldwing does everything better, that's not up for debate. It is demonstrably and empirically just a better motorcycle than the old one. But the '93 Aspencade does nearly the same thing while feeling more mechanical and charming. Even though the Marysville plant is no longer in operation and Goldwings are now being produced in Japan, the legacy of the development of this motorcycle looms large. There's nothing quite like a Goldwing, and I don't think there ever will be. Thanks for checking out today's review. What do you think of the Wing? Do you ride one? Do you love one? Leave me a comment down below. If you want to rent a cool bike in your area, check out Twisted Road in the link in the description below. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later.